Where is home? And how do we find it? That search can take people on tremendous global journeys.
We're all travelers in this life. And we shape in our soul by experiences. There's a mystical side to migration.
The history of migration is not one people, one country, one culture, or one story.
I'm a migrant. I can connect with you. Other migrants are just like me. It gives me an understanding for other cultures that non-migrants wouldn't necessarily understand. It puts a whole new dimension into my view of other people.
For you, the term migrant, how much do you own that in your life?
I own it, but the other migrants.
Which part of Turkey were you from?
The capital, Ankara. My name's Naz, and I lived in Turkey till I was about 13. I actually went to Korea when I was little. After Korea, we moved to Turkey and moved from Turkey to here when I was about 13.
Do you have memories of Korea as well?
I do, yeah. And before that, my parents have travelled a lot as well with my brother. So they've been to Canada. My brother was born in Canada.
Was your heritage Turkish, or was there, were their great-grandparents Turkish? Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
All very Turkish, yeah. Dates back to the Ottoman Empire.
You leave quite a rich culture. You're immersed in that richness of that tradition, that history. Mm-hmm. For a long period, it's quite a rich culture.
Yeah.
And you're about to leave to unknown lands. Was that in your mind at 13? Were you aware of that?
No, because it was sold to us. It was sold as, this is a mystery. The West is really looked up upon in Turkey. So it's that American movies and the American ads and the American toys and the American lollies. And, it was sort of sold to us in that way that we are going to live a Western life and it's going to be so much better than the life that we're living now. So I went there with no qualms and not much anxiety regarding leaving it behind.
Okay.
Surprisingly.
Because it looked like you were leaving a tapestry of a culture for a much more interesting, contemporary, new world culture?
Yes.
Were you more aware of it because you had actually had some experience outside of Turkey? Or your family had brought that experience into your family?
Probably. But I was probably also more aware of it because my dad was a heavily sort of idealistic man around that. So he taught us to think for ourselves, and he could speak English very well. He has a law degree.
He'd been to Korea, he'd been to Canada, but he now chooses Australia as a place to migrate to.
Okay, so he had two choices. One was Canada, but it's really, really cold. So his next best thing was Australia because he felt that the culture was very similar to Canadians, easygoing, down to earth, really open-minded, Western sort of way of living.
Had he been to Australia?
No, but he had a friend in Australia who talked him into it. Yeah, a good friend that lived here.
Someone that had migrated before?
Yeah.
Okay, so then he comes home and explains this is going to be a permanent move, or he didn't quite tell you that it would be permanent?
First he needed to talk my poor mum into it because they were in their 40s at the time, quite settled and house and jobs and, lifestyle pretty set in stone. And everyone around my mum was telling her that my dad was being crazy and this is such a big move to shift your children from school and move your whole house. And he sold it to my mum, I think, by saying I will only be there for 5 to 6 years. We'll get our kids educated in Australia, because having a Western Australian or American or New Zealand or Canadian education in Turkey looks really, really good on your resume. So you're pretty much, you're very well respected if you've travelled and studied overseas.
Your arrival in those weeks and months when you start to live a new life in a new culture, did you feel an alien in a strange place?
I did, yeah. That's when the reality kicked in. Well, I realised I didn't have any friends, and I realised that I couldn't speak the language very well, even though I thought my English was very good, but the Australian lingo I didn't understand any of it.
Were there any particular words or phrases that confused you?
Yeah, ta. What was the other one? G'day. I just never understood. I didn't understand that for a long time until I started school, and Australians tend to roll their words around quite a lot, so there's a lot of mumbling, and it was the mumbling that I never really understood, because we learnt English language in Turkey, we learnt proper English speaking, and of course there's a lingo, and I didn't know about that. It's interesting. I came with all positivity and hope and excitement, but it did hit me pretty hard when school started. ESL school, they called it. I did it for 6 months. Every single other kid there was Asian, which they spoke Mandarin, and they were really cliquey, and and I was literally the only non-Asian person.
And had you had much touch? I mean, obviously you went to Korea, but you probably didn't remember much.
No, I didn't know any Korean or any Mandarin or anything like that. And I think the teachers felt really sorry for me, but I picked up, so I wanted to leave that school so badly that I picked up English so well, and I talked English to the teachers, and I talked English at home. I just wanted to really get going and get into high school as soon as possible.
So you really were suddenly an alien, that you hadn't predicted that would occur?
No, not at all.
You somehow thought the world might be populated with Turkish people, and in some way they would be or they'd be American.
Yeah, or American, or someone English speaking. So I could still speak English. It just wasn't good enough for high school. High school absolutely sucked for me. When people move here, they stop at that culture.
Now you're in a very alien land, which is not what you expected. You're expected to fit in.
In Turkey, I went from being the most popular girl in school, because I don't look very Turkish. I looked Western. So in Turkey, everybody wanted to be my friend. And, I had a whole group of friends and social outings. And, I went from that to being the new kid in town who can't speak English very well. And it wasn't really that I couldn't speak English very well. It was just the lingo. I needed to get the lingo. I think I was quite wounded from the 6 months at ESL, because I was extremely isolated. And I walked into the new high school with that wound, which spoke out insecurity, lack of confidence, and, to the bullies. It was kind of like a meat market for them. The turning point for me was when I actually told everyone to fuck off. And I became quite an angry, leave me alone, you bitches, kind of really tough girl. And the minute I did that, and I mean the minute, the day I actually started telling people where to go, is the day that I started making friends. That people started, not the bullies, but the people who were probably the fence sitters, who were probably quite concerned about being my friend, started becoming my friend.
In an anglicised way, you stood up for your rights and you were modelling yourself on a different kind of...
Yeah. It wasn't in me. That sort of wasn't really... I've never experienced bullying before, you know, so I didn't know how to deal with it. And I did look around and it seemed like that was the way kids were interacting with themselves.
Am I right in thinking at that point there were almost Hollywood movies that were portraying teenagers?
Yeah.
In that?
Yeah.
And were you aware of that? And you were sort of saying, well, there are models there that aren't my cultural models or this culture's model, but there is a model for a way of dealing with this?
Yeah, well, looking back, yeah, definitely. Looking back at it now, absolutely.
You get caught and lost in a sea between countries where you kind of go, where's my models? Because it's no longer the country I came from. I don't see the models in the country I'm living in. Were you then aware of other Turkish migrants of your age group?
Mum tried really hard for me to connect with the other Turkish migrants of my age group, but I felt really out of touch with them because I'd come from an era in Turkey where people had evolved past certain... It's hard to explain, but when people move here, they stop at that culture, and that culture keeps growing and changing, and, you know, in the other country it moves and it's fluid and it becomes something else. Whereas the people who have come here at a certain age, they get stunted in that, on that level of culture. So my level and their level, because they had grown up here more with parents that had instilled in them the culture from back then, didn't match. So I couldn't get on with many of them. It just didn't feel... They didn't feel like my old friends in Turkey at all. So
you were on the road to adaptation and an adventure, really. You had to wander.
Yeah.
To find your new status and way of being.
Where I belong, yeah. And the friends I made in high school, interestingly enough, they were the multicultural group. There was an Italian and a Chinese, Mary. She was one of my best friends back then. A Greek girl. My first boyfriend was Greek, so I did gravitate towards the multicultural people. Looking back on that, do you think that's what attracted you to each other? No. At the time, no. But now looking back at it, absolutely. Absolutely. So you can almost become cross-cultural. Yeah. Because you have a connection with those people because you've had that same experience. Yes. Yeah. That's really insightful. I was just so relieved that I'd found friends. The cultural side of it didn't actually cross my mind until you mention it now. But when you went to those houses and things were very different there, how did you react to that? My reaction was really comfortable because there was that common thread with their parenting, the cultural parents' parenting versus the Australian parents' parenting. Were you welcomed into the home? Very much so, yeah. Now, why is that? Because you're a strange culture, they're welcoming in? Probably, yeah, probably. And my mum and my parents welcomed those, I guess, the more multicultural people home, and they still do to this day. How did you feel about your life at this point with these new groups of friends, even a boyfriend from another culture and parent groups from other cultures? How did you feel about your life? Good, yeah, really good. Why was it good? Because I had people around me. I was connecting with people. I was a social person to start with, And I became a very withdrawn person and a very insecure, and that was just not, that was probably the first time I've ever felt insecure and not confident in myself. And then once I had these people around me, it then reaffirmed to me that I was a worthy person to be friends with and connect with, and, you know, and it literally just brought me back to my confidence.
Do you actually think you became aware that these migrants and your migrant background was enriching your life? Enriching theirs?
Yes, absolutely. There was a real welcoming from the multicultural community.
Did you feel that existed as much outside of that community? Did you feel as a migrant you were embraced?
No. We had an Italian next door neighbour, and they were the ones that welcomed us the most.
Were they embracing you because you were like them, a minority, or were they embracing you because you were interesting and you were a migrant?
I'm not sure. Probably because we were a migrant to start with, but secondarily, the woman of the house got on really well, you know, cooking and sort of that displacement that they probably felt. I think she really supported her and really helped her through my mum's distress about being in a new country. I like to think that I actually don't belong on a certain territorial land. Culture can have two polarities, and there's a positive and a negative. The positive part of culture is that it has a real connectedness and a togetherness and a sort of belongingness and a really lovely taste to it. But on the negative side of culture, it creates segregation, it creates racism, it creates, oh, well, so she's this, so that must mean that she is from this culture, which means that she's like this, you know, and that then perpetuates the person's actual personality becoming that when it doesn't necessarily have to be that way.
Do you consider yourself as a migrant?
Yes. Yeah.
Why is that?
Because I am.
And that's a good thing?
I don't, overtly bring it out with people, but if I ever get close to somebody, my migrant background will come out because it's a part of my story, it's a part of my history, and it's my family.
Do you feel that you've had to assimilate into Australian culture to be comfortable?
Yes. Yeah.
Do you see yourself as Australian?
I wouldn't identify myself as Australian or Turkish. I really wouldn't. Probably if I had to choose, I'd probably say I'm a lot more Australian. Yeah.
Are you aware of that in your identity?
Yeah. But that also comes from me, from choice as well. I liked the culture. I liked the Australian culture. I liked the freedom that people got. I liked the idea of being able to wear whatever I like and walk out on the streets. And I liked the idea of being able to have boyfriends and, being able to live with them before getting married. And all of those things really resonated to my freedom personality that's really open-minded and really quite a rebel, really. I don't like being told what to do.
But that's something that Australia's developed. It's not always been that open.
No.
Was that true for you in your experience over these years?
They only became open to me when I opened up to them and when there was not a language barrier. And I found that the only level of racism that I ever experienced in Australia was in the first 2-3 years. And that was because of the language barrier and teenage behaviour. But after that, because I don't also look European, that assimilated me from point go.
Are you assimilating to Australian culture that you see as your friends of Greek, Turkish, English, German, Chinese origin? That's Australia to you, or is it a white Australian culture?
I think Australian culture is quite divided. So currently, I would say a big chunk of my group of friends that I'm very close with are Australian. They're very Australian. They've grown up in an Australian upbringing, Australian life. My ex-husband was a half Australian, half South African, black South African, whom was absolutely Australian, really Australian. But I think it was his sort of half background that I gravitated towards with him. The two cultures in Australia are in my view, are the real Australian, you know, the barbecue cooking and the beer drinking and the football watching Australians. And then there's the other type of Australians who are quite liberal and who are, again, they might be beer drinking, football watching, barbecue cooking Australians, but they're actually really, really quite interested in other worldviews. They watch other world news. They are intellectuals in some way, and they actually sometimes get quite embarrassed of the other side of the Australians. So they're the two types, and the ones I usually would probably gravitate towards would be the Australians that are much more open-minded and accepting. And
do your friends think of you as a migrant?
No. They see me as an absolute and utter Australian.
And how do you feel about that?
I sometimes have to remind them that I'm not.
Where is home now? Do you think it's clear?
No, it's not clear, and I'm quite happy for it to be unclear. I think the clarity of home, for me anyway, from a philosophical standpoint, if you kind of say, this is my home, then you're closing off the opportunity for your moments to be your home. If I said, you know, this is my home, or Turkey is my home, this is my background, this is my culture, this is who I am, it's then, it doesn't give me the opportunity for that place at that time when I'm there to be my home place, the place that I'm at that moment.
There's still an adventurous or wanderer aspect to your existence?
Yeah, a real non-certainty about my existence that I feel very comfortable with. It gives me freedom to roam. It's nice to not belong to one place. It extends me, it makes me fluid. It gives me the opportunity to change who I am when I feel like it. It makes me colourful. It gives me a level of experience that non-migrants don't have. My dad envisioned a better future for his children, and it's worked. My brothers shaked my dad's hand a couple of years ago and thanked him for moving here.
If you believe you have an interesting migration story to tell, contact us at this email address. We'd like to represent as many nationalities as possible in this program.